Okay, so let's just start. Just in prayer posture. The forearms are sort of horizontal. Feel the bottom of the spine extending down. Feel the two sitting bones. You'd like the two sitting bones to sort of widen. Feel that they're sort of moving apart a little bit. And that gives more access for the sacrum. Now let's just do the heart qigong. So just bringing the hands up. So really extend the spine, especially the middle back between the shoulder blades. You want that to be really flat. And then just let the hands down. And now just reaching forwards. So gathering the qi from the air, bringing it into the heart. And you can imagine it dipping down into the dantian. So the spine is collapsing a little bit. Using the muscles of the lower back to extend the spine. And then using the muscles of the belly to bring the hands down. So remember, we always assist gravity. Reaching out, belly kicking in to bring the hands in. And then the lower back. And the belly again. So when you extend here, really go for it. Like a snake emerging from its skin, its old skin, or a butterfly squeezing out of a chrysalis. So this is really the first action of the baby as it comes out of the womb. Even before it starts breathing, it's extending its spine to get through that tunnel. So having been all curled up into a ball, it just extends its spine to emerge. So just imagine there's no gravity. So every movement, you have to do it. You can't just let gravity bring your hands down. So here, the belly's already kicking in. And then this time, just keep the hands out at the side and we'll do a few twisting. So maybe turn one hand over just to give a degree of asymmetry. But just maintain the mind intending out of the fingers, especially the middle finger. And that will enable you to keep the arms up. There's still a sense that the shoulders are relaxing away from the neck and down into the hands. Really feel the muscles in the waist, the belt of the waist. And now let's just tilt. The hand that's facing down, just tilt that one down until that hand is touching the ground. And just feel that line from the ground through to the upper hand. There's a sense of something rolling down the arms. into the ground, but there's also a sense of something coming out of the ground and up into the upper hand. So we just want to feel those two flows. Back up and then just turn the hands and then tip the other side. Feel the hand that touches the ground just earthing and allowing a flow up. The earth is sucking energy into it, but it's also providing energy. And then one more this side. So just turning the hands over again. Hand on the ground. And just lean into it. So you're sort of just putting a little bit of weight in it. So you can just imagine the roots coming out of the heel of the palm into the ground. You can feel the fingers extending and also digging in. And then this flow of fine energy that's coming up into the upper hand. And now let's just try just turning, but like they do in yoga, you know, where you have one, you bring one hand behind the back and the other hand on the opposite knee. And then just twisting. So like do like a count of three. So twist, twist, twist. And then you just swap round. So twist, twist, twist. Just enjoy the spine clicking. 1, 2, 3. Just tightening the belly, but really sort of pinpointing the dantian. So remember, we used to use this exercise to actually locate the dantian, because when you tighten the muscles in the belly, the center of that tension is basically the dantian. So I'm pulling in the belly, and then I'm releasing. So as though you're trying to pull the dantian towards the min meng, like you're trying to make them one thing. And then you release them and they drift apart. So this is the dantian pulling towards the min meng. And then if anything, when you open up again, it's the min meng pushing the dantian forwards. Closing the front, closing the fists and the eyes, and then opening. And just feel the dantian. So the presence of mind in the dantian, is that really that liberates the spirit, that just allows the spirit just to infuse your body, open your joints, and put you into a state of really alert readiness. So a phrase he would often use when he was encouraging me to work a little harder was, if you don't do the work, no one will. So there's a sense that one practices not for oneself. So there's a sense of service and very much of especially when you're meditating, sitting vigil. You're being vigilant. You're doing something that most don't. So it's like you're sitting, your discipline, your Dan Chen is allowing the world around you a degree of freedom that it wouldn't have otherwise. So for John, this was very important. It's like the Bodhisattva vow, with the Tibetan Buddhists. You're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for all sentient beings. So I remember when he went to Sri Lanka with Melanie. He left me in charge. I was actually living there to look after the cats. We were a little bit worried that he may never come back. He may enjoy Sri Lanka a little bit more than us. So I had this idea of keeping vigil, of having a form going on 24 hours a day for the time that he wasn't there, as like a sort of draw, something to sort of draw him back. And of course, it never happened. I just thought he'd just think I was stupid. But when he came back and we were chatting, I mentioned it to him and he says, wow, that's really strong. You should have done it. So when you keep this sort of vigilant tone in the belly, then your energy can just expand out and fill the room. When you slacken off in the belly, either because you're lazy or tired or because you've started talking to yourself in your head, then the energy basically disappears. There is no longer energy. So the first stage to getting into energy is through meditation, learning to quieten the mind. And it never really becomes quiet. It's just that you learn to pay attention to other things. Okay, so let's stand up now. So riding horse. It's a lovely image. There's lots of equestrian statues in London. And it's just lovely seeing the spines. There's something about being on a horse that just gives you good posture. So this feeling that your sitting bones, which aren't that much too far forwards of the sacrum, are sitting on something and you're rising up from it. So a sense that your sternum is slightly proud and it's above the sacrum. So the head is maybe a little further back than you're used to. So the width between the knees and the thighs, so that these joints here are very open. Mind in the dantian. So that same feeling of contraction. So it's the contraction here that allows the vigilance. You're on guard. You're keeping watch. Feel your own heaviness. And then feel your legs pushing against that. So your legs are not just holding you in position. They're really trying to extend through you. And that comes from a turn. If I turn this way, I can get the energy coming up my body. So you can turn either way. So there's always a sense of this sort of slow wriggle going on in your hips, your waist, your spine, as your legs are trying to extend the energy up you to the top of the head and down into the arms. So that's why we sink. So remember, John used to liken the flow of energy, of body energy, to like molten rock. You know, when the lava comes out and you see it flowing, and it's slow, it sort of rolls over itself because it's hardening, and then the stuff underneath has to come up to come out, then that hardens, some more stuff from underneath has to come out. So there's this sense of this sort of slow, wriggly flow. And that comes from your two legs working against your weight, but also working against each other. So there's part of me that's trying to expand the knees apart and come down to the ground. And there's another part of me that's really trying to sort of wriggle its way through that. So if you don't have the two things sort of fighting each other, then there's no energy. Now let's just go down. You don't have to go down very far, and then up. So just practicing these two actions really here, this sense that you're going down by really opening here, expanding the knees apart, and then squeezing back up through that. This is not so much A, B, A, B. It's like this is going on all the time. And then here, something squeezes up through it just enough to get you to start rising. And then, so this is like the continuum. The down is the continuum, the sinking, the gravity. And then through that, you can extend. So this sense that the space between your legs is breathing. So it's the quietness of your mind that produces the viscosity, the thickness of the magma, of that molten rock. Yeah, so the way I practice this in my class is to get like the student going down like this, and then I will actually push them. So they have to push against me to come back up. And I just release my push slowly. Someone's pushing me down and I'm just squeezing through them. They just release slowly to allow that up to be slow. So mind continuous. So imagine if you were sort of firing up really quickly with a burst of explosive energy, probably with a yell or a scream. Then you're trying to simulate exactly that, but in slow motion, real slow motion. Frame by frame, you come up 1, 2, 3, 4. And now let's just stand again. Now this should be really bowed now. So what John used to call crocodile legs. So the sense that the legs insert from the side of your sacrum rather than from underneath it. So they're like, the legs are like two pieces of like sprung steel, springy steel, that come up and come down like this, a bit like the shape of a heart. And they're attached to the top of the sacrum. And then the sacrum has got like a boing, a bounce, which just comes from the natural sprung quality of these bowed legs, rather than me intentionally bending my knees. to produce an up and down. So you should feel really sort of sprung and responsive. They say, don't they, the Tai Chi master feels like sprung steel. You touch them and apply a little bit of energy and you get sprung off. And then we just want to feel the spirit. So that thing in you that just goes ping, and the joints, especially the joints here, the hips and the sacroiliacs, just sort of open, feels like everything just opens. And then everything's really sort of poised and balanced. That's equilibrium. So it was that, the quiet mind allowing the spirit to spring into action. Is that really that brought out that energetic body that John was working on, with the wings and the mane and the tail and the horns and all these structures? When the joints spring open, there's almost a sense that the sacrum is just hovering. It's just hovering in this sort of force field. It's not actually touching anything. Okay, now let's do the one where we come on forwards onto the toes, because then it gets even more spirited. So now the heel's coming up. You should look like you've just seen a ghost, with these sort of wide, awestruck eyes, and this real fear and trembling. Rock back, but one at a time, and just extending the heels. I extend my heel back and then I cut it under. So that requires my tail and my sacrum. And then this one again. Extend the tail backwards. And then cut it under. It's got the feeling of trying to squeeze like a viscous fluid through a narrow tube. So something in you has to really sort of just tighten. So when you get some control of your mind, then you can really localize it and just really get it to do work. With the body. So here, ooh. So the heel, it comes up a little bit first, and then it hooks back down and under. So it's like my tail has to point upwards for a moment, and then it points back, and then it scoops down and under. It's quite a special feeling, really. Extending back behind yourself. It's a bit like single whip. It's like the only posture where we have an arm behind us. And you can really feel it. It's like it's part of your wing. So as you settle down, it sort of funnels down into the Dantian. And then something in your mind just releases, and the spirit can come out. And then you get a sense of expansion. Like everything is just going out a little bit, opening all the joints. So you need the narrowing spiral, the narrowing jaya, spiraling into the Dantian before you can allow the widening jaya to come up out of it. And it's just really just something happens in your mind. It's just, whoa, there it is. And let's just try one more coming forwards. So really sort of extend the toes and then just grip them into the ground. You pull yourself off the heels. You now have to root basically through your toes and your ball of your foot in order to allow the heel to come up, because we normally root through the heel. And just really feeling the little toes, so the outside edges. So just imagine what a porcupine has to do to erect its spines. The spines are just hairs that have just got loads of coats of keratin on them, and they're really sharp. They're beautiful. It's every now and then you find a porcupine spine here, a quill, and they're really beautiful. So what does that porcupine have to do to actually make its hairs stand up to protect it? And that's basically what you have to do to spring open your joints, to activate your spirit. back with the heel. Just imagine you're in a straitjacket and you're trying to just wriggle free. Remember when John said the perfect piece of equipment with which to develop Tai Chi strength would be like a tight wetsuit, like a rubber suit that constricted everything that you tried to do, including your breathing. So you really had to work. But a sense of working against a rubbery resistance, against an elastic resistance, and not against a wall, but against something that will give, but it just requires you to make a real effort. Try and go behind yourself. So here I'm really reaching for something that's right behind me, not just at my side. Almost like I'm trying to grab hold of my own tail. So let's bring it back. Now just sit on the horse, relax. So this feeling of the spirit rising and the joints springing open. For me, that's very much a sense of the sky, an awareness of the heavens above you, the openness, the vastness compared to you and the earth. So a real sense that it's calling something out of you, something to spring into action. Like young creatures, playful, like gambolling lambs. full of the joys of life. Go for walks outside, away from people, away from buildings. Like Nietzsche. Nietzsche was always looking for the perfect environment that would enable him to think. For philosophers, thinking isn't what we think of as thinking. What we think of as thinking is anxiety. So for them, thinking is insight. It's like a sudden flash of, wow, I've never thought of that before, that sort of thing. He just found the mountains of Switzerland, that just enabled the spirit to lift so that the mind can just spark with insight. The remarkable thing about him was he just wasn't frightened of what came up, and he worked on it. He converted those insights into breakthroughs. That's what John used to say, when you have an insight, which we have them all the time, you have to then really discipline yourself and work on it assiduously. He used to say for at least 6 months before it's internalized and you make a breakthrough, your energy changes. And now let's just bring it up a bit. And now this image of emptying and filling. So the bottle of wine being emptied into the glass. So as the wine empties from the bottle, it is descending, and as it fills the glass, it is ascending, it's coming up. And so here, I turn this way and I fill this leg. There's a sense that something is pouring out of this side of my body and into this leg. And then I can let that fill this side. So again, just trying to make sure that we turn. I've been reading the Tai Chi classics again, and the sort of the importance of turning. Nothing happens without turning. So a sense of something rising up this leg and then pouring down this leg. And so it basically becomes waving hands in the clouds or the figure of 8 exercise. But I want that same tight, magmatic of magma flow that we had when we were doing the previous exercise. Part of my mind is with the hand that's going down into the leg, and part of my mind is with the other hand that's coming out of that leg. Part of the mind is with the emptying, and part of your mind is with the filling. So the down always precedes the up. The up is a consequence of the down. Here my hand is going down into the foot, and then something can come out of that leg. Try to keep the spine in the middle. So you're going from like 70-30 to 30-70. So you're not really putting all of your weight in. Just imagine someone's come up behind you and they're pressing your shoulders down into your legs. This is what I do with my students, and I always get the same response basically, which is, oh wow, I didn't realize I had to work so hard. It's always revealing because when they have to work hard, they don't like it, of course, because everyone is lazy nowadays. But it really brings their spirit up. So when they're having to fight against possible failure, then it just rouses the spirit and they feel better for it. So in one sense, I'm scanning the body to find tension, which I can relax. And then there's the complement of that, which is scanning everything, scanning what you're doing to find if you can work harder. Are there places that aren't moving? And just really getting those dead spots alive with movement, especially in the mind. Bring it back to riding horse. So I've got a student who's an Alexander teacher, and she's often talks about her Alexander teacher. And she says that he had a saying, he used to say, don't forget that you have 7 vertebrae in your neck, which are quite capable of keeping your head poised without you having to hold it stiff. So most of us have got like stiff spines, especially in the neck and especially in the lumbar spine. So what we'd like to do is really loosen each vertebra relative to the ones around it, so that these ripples and flows of energy can just travel up it. Yeah, so when the spine is free, you feel really wobbly. It's like, ooh, it's like, because the spine just becomes very sensitive. It's picking up messages all the time and responding to them. So when the mind quietens down, then the neck can free up, and then the head is just bright and empty, functioning naturally, not thinking. It's just full of awe, just full of a sense of wonder. Always seeing the world anew, like it's never seen it before. You know, like when the light changes and suddenly you think, oh, wow, I hadn't noticed that. So the light is changing all the time. And then just the other image we've been working on. Instead of thinking of yourself as a left side and a right side with a split in the middle, think of the spine and the cranium, the craniosacral system from the tailbone to the top of the head as being you. So that's where you are. That's your electricity, if you like, your central nervous system, your central processor. And then it's flanked by these 2 meaty slaves or servants. Like the prince or the princess sitting in that one of those boxes being carried by slaves. The prince is just, he's sitting there quietly because he's not actually having to move himself. Someone else is doing it for him. So there's that sense that these 2 sides of my body are just doing their thing. They're moving me around, they're feeding me, and I'm just here in the middle, quiet and calm and serene, bright, shining. feeling the legs coming up from the sacrum and down, and the arms coming up from the heart and into the hands. So very much in that image of the heart. So the two becoming one. Again, just imagine someone behind you. They've just come up and they've just rested their hands on your shoulders and just let their arms relax. So you've basically got the weight of their arms or their forearms hanging on your shoulders. So it's not very much, but it's enough to sort of get you into minor panic mode. It's just putting a little bit more strain. And it sort of wakes you up. It's the right sort of anxiety. It's an anxiety that actually springs you open and activates the spirit, rather than an anxiety that's just turning endlessly, grinding you down. So it's always striking, when I work with people, that when I put them under enough pressure for their spirit to come up, they hate it. And they certainly wouldn't practice it. I love that Yang Cheng Fu quote. Without daily discipline, you will always be an outsider. That's what John used to say about like students that sort of wanted to belong, wanted to be part of like John's circle, but were too lazy to work. John used to say he's knocking at the window trying to get in. Doesn't realize that in order to get in, he just has to practice. And it's a long process. You have to practice for a long time before you're allowed admittance. You just have to practice until it dawns on you that it's not for you. You're not practicing for yourself. You're not practicing to get energy, to get feelings, to get pleasure, to get prestige. You're doing it for others. It's like going out to work to feed the family. Okay, let's just finish with a little bit of breathing. trying to extend it. So just make the breath slower, breathing out or in, it doesn't matter which, and then reversing it. But just keep the airways open. So even here, when I've finished breathing out, there's still a sense that I can just contract a little bit more to squeeze a bit more of that stale air out. And then here, when it feels like I can't breathe any more in, I just keep this feeling of expansion. So even if there's no more air coming in, I'm still expanding my spirit. So your whole body is one big lung. So the air that's coming in is going everywhere, down to my toes, tips of my fingers. So riding horse feels quite normal after that. So when I complain to the students that they're not practicing, the normal response is, well, it never feels the same when I do it on my own. No, it doesn't feel the same, but it should feel better. There should be a sense that, you know, when you're in what John used to call the privacy of your own boudoir, then things can come out that the presence of other people tends to dampen. So we're so used to the world of other people. We crave company. I don't know why, I don't. But most people, they find it very difficult being on their own. So like Ronit's mother, you know, when I'm on my own, I just start worrying. So it's like they've never done any work. They haven't started. And sort of John used to have a wonderful phrase for people like that. He'd say, they're not ready to begin. So like something has to happen, some event, some catastrophe or something, like they need to get struck down by cancer or something like that, for them to sort of wake up sufficiently to think, oh, fuck, I better do something. So unless you can find the company of other people that are as spirited as you are, people basically just interested in spiritual work, work with them. But, other company just, tolerate it and just be looking forward to the next time you're alone and you can just sit and be quiet. And have this sense of contraction drawing me into the belly and into this leg so that this leg can pop up. How can I just straighten the legs? It's very much that sense of wriggling up through the sacrum that's hanging heavily at the back here. So there's a sense that you've only pushed up part of yourself. There's another part that's really hanging down. So the legs never stop fighting. So the left leg is always fighting the right leg, and the front of the leg is always fighting the back of the leg. So mind in the Danchen. So this sense that the Danchen is contracting and receding inwards towards the sacrum, really, towards the Min Meng, but it's then dropping down. The head is suspended. So this sense that we had when we were here with the middle finger just directing up the spine and lengthening it, and the tip of the tongue on the roof of the mouth. So these are all like little anchor points. And then you can just feel the little flame in the thymus licking upwards. So the tip of the tongue on the roof of the mouth, it's as though it's trying to drive up to this point from which you are suspended. So normally the tip of the tongue is just behind the front teeth. And that's to get the chi channel connected. So John said, no, right on the roof of the palate, and just drive it up, and then it's for spirit.